Hey guys, good afternoon, and welcome to my channel. One of the things I felt was important to share as part of, uh, my experience, things that I've done in my past, things I've gone through from a life experience standpoint. I guess is where I'm getting at with this. Is when I transitioned out of the military. I was military police from '97 to '02, and I was actually stationed in Busan, South Korea when I got out of the military. And one of the challenges that I had is that was kind of my first real job. A couple of jobs prior to that. Got out of high school, did some part-time stuff, did some telemarketing for MCI, some basic stuff like that. But the military is my first kind of real job, if you will, benefits, things of that nature. And what I wasn't prepared for, and look, the military has a lot of great programs to assist with that transition into the civilian life. But there's a lot of things that they don't cover, and I think that the overwhelming majority of people who are transitioning out of the military just fail to take advantage of a lot of those programs. And it kind of sets us up for failure. And, I was one of those people. And so transitioning from the military life to civilian life was rather challenging. And there's a lot of things that in hindsight, I wish I'd known then what I know now. And so that's what I want to share today is really kind of five key pieces that if you are a service, person and you're getting ready to transition to civilian life, or you're retiring, at a time where you're starting chapter two into a new civilian career. These five things I think will be key for you to know. First and foremost is prior to that transition, you want to build a transition slash emergency fund. So most of us have heard of emergency fund before. If anybody's ever done a financial plan with somebody, it's typically the first piece that needs to be in place because it protects everything else. But it also needs to be a little bit more elevated because it needs to be that transition fund. Because depending on where you're at when you get out of service and you separate from service, you might be doing it from overseas. You might not be in a position where you're able to attend interviews and get that job lined up so there's a seamless transition. There might be a month or two or three where you may not have any real source of income, and that you want to have that chunk of cash that you have access to, liquid capital to help pay the bills, keep food on the table, electricity on, taking care of your family, while you prepare to close that chapter and open up chapter two. So, if you have a good idea of when you're going to be getting out, you want to kind of start backwards planning and saying, from this date forward, I'm going to save a little bit extra money so that I can have X by the time I transition out of the military. Out of all these steps, that was actually the one thing that I did do relatively well. Is I started saving considerably. So when I did get out and started that transition into civilian life, I was at least financially in the immediate term set up. Um, but these other ones, I absolutely did not do. So moving on to number two is creating a realistic civilian budget. So what does that mean? Am I going to live life differently? Not necessarily, but there's expenses that the military took care of for you, or they gave you additional income to pay for. One of the two that in the civilian world you simply don't have. All of it comes out of your income. And that can be a surprise for some people because become so accustomed to the way that the services operate. And we look at our paycheck and the amount of money we get, the cost of living adjustments, the basic allowances for housing and substance, and things of that nature. And if you have dependents, the extra income that you get from all those types of different sources. And heaven forbid you be overseas and you're getting hazardous duty pay or deployment pay, a lot of that stuff goes away. So you want to understand, what does your life cost to live? And one of the easiest ways to do that is to think about, when you earn money, there's only three things you can do with it. And if you've seen some of my other videos, you've heard me mention this before, but you either pay it in taxes, you save it, or you spend it. So if you want to have a pretty good idea of what your budget is, take your overall gross income, all the income that you earn, and subtract out any qualified savings that are tax deductible. So your TSP, prime example. But if you're married and maybe that spouse isn't in the military, they're 403B, 401k, 457, things of that nature, traditional IRA contributions. So you subtract those out. That gives you what I call your new gross. Out of that gross income, subtract out a flat 25% for taxes. So if you're living in states that don't have state taxes, you subtract out 20%. But most states will have taxes, and at the end of the day, 25% is a good rule of thumb. So that's going to be kind of your original net. Then after that, you want to subtract out, what are you saving elsewhere? So Roth IRA contributions, saving into other investment accounts, or saving into a high interest savings account. That gives you what I call your new net. that is what you're spending. You've already accounted for taxes. You've accounted for every dollar that you're saving. So if you're not spending it in taxes and you're not saving it, you're spending it. That's going to be your approximate budget. So that's a good place to start. The reason why that's important is that as you start to secure employment or you're negotiating salaries, things of that nature, you have a good idea of what you need to make in order to maintain your lifestyle. One of the first things I did when I got out of the military and I got back stateside and kind of got myself organized, if you will, and finished the x-rays on my hand that I had broken the day before I got out, um, is I secured employment at two different places. I knew that I needed to generate income. And that's the first thing I did. Grabbed two jobs immediately, and that helped me out tremendously. So um, the third thing, and this is where I really dropped the ball, is securing new health insurance, new life insurance, and just new benefits in general. When you're in the military, at least when I was in, God, this is 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, benefits were easy. You checked a couple boxes. You had great health benefits, dental, vision, life insurance, like all that stuff. It very much so kind of set it and forget it. There weren't many options. With that being said, a lot of that stuff was taken care of for you. Now there wasn't a lot of co-pays and the things that we were responsible for. Heck, I mean, even being stationed overseas, great healthcare. When you're over there. And then I get out and I get into the civilian world and I get my first job and run through this benefits package that I felt like was the size of an encyclopedia, and I don't understand any of it. And because of that lack of understanding and knowledge and life experience, I didn't make the best choices when choosing plans because I didn't understand how they worked, the differences, things of that nature. So whether you have a great partner that understands that, maybe your spouse is going to carry the group benefits, you just transition onto theirs, or you get that financial partner that's going to come in and help you make some of those key financial decisions. Securing the new benefits is going to be key, especially life insurance. Because if you're married, and a lot of people who transition out of the military, even prior to retiring from the military or actual military retirement, are still relatively young. I mean, there's people retiring from the military, after their years of service, they qualify for a pension in their 40s. I mean, they're still a couple of decades away from true retirement. So life insurance is also key to make sure that you have some level of protection in case something were to happen to you. The next piece is going to be understand and plan for taxes. Another kind of aha moment is looking back and truly not understanding how my income was taxed. While I was in the military, there's a lot of different types of military income that you could receive. Um, whether it's your base pay, whether it's allowances, whether it's elevated pay for hazardous duty pay or overseas stations, things of that nature. All that stuff can be taxed differently. Understanding how your military pension is going to be taxed. If you actually retire and you're close to Social Security age, and you turn on those benefits as well, how are those going to be taxed? What about your spouse's benefits? What about their assets? It's understanding how your taxes work and how they're going to impact you now that you're separated from service. So taxes can be one of those things where if you don't understand it, you don't understand the impact to your situation in the civilian world. It could be very eye-opening, and it could have a detrimental impact to your day-to-day life until you get that figured out. But again, it goes back to number one, that transition budget can really help you in those times of need if you get to a situation where your take-home pay is not nearly as much as you thought it was. But again, planning when you get out, partnering with somebody could be key for you for that. And the last piece is start a civilian retirement savings plan. So this is not necessarily because you have to, although there are some times when people transition out of service or they retire, maybe they're leaning heavily on their pension, but that pension is not going to replace all the income that you earn. So it's got to be supplemented with something. So when you do get that new job, that new employment, one thing that a lot of people who transition out, I know that I wasn't aware of it, is understanding how civilian employer-sponsored retirement plans work. Understanding what you have to do to get the match. Understanding if there is a match at all. Some of them are very basic. You get a match of 3% as long as you put 3% in. That's very easy to understand. Most people have had some experience with that. But look, as a financial planner, I've seen a lot of different retirement plans, and some of them are very convoluted when it comes to what you have to do to take advantage of the match. But the last thing you want to do is not participate in that because you're like, well, I got retired, I got a pension, I'll have Social Security in a few years. I don't need to save any more money. I've already saved enough. And maybe you have, but is that your guess? Or have you worked with a professional to put together a financial plan that outlines the fact that you no longer need to save? Because those are two completely different situations. The latter gives you the peace of mind and the confidence knowing that you don't have to save. The prior, you're guessing. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to guess about my financial future, because when you find out that you're wrong, that you guessed inaccurately, you're typically really old, you don't want to work, you can't work, nobody's going to hire you, and you're kind of stuck with that situation. So start saving if you can. If you can't start saving, identify what you need to do from a financial standpoint, whether it's budgeting, making changes to your benefits, making changes to your spending, paying down some liabilities, and reallocating dollars so you can save is one of the great ways that you can make that adjustment. But I'm going to double back a little bit. Working with a professional, getting that financial plan together will help you identify even if you do need to save, because maybe you don't need to. Maybe you're already in a great position and you now can spend what you're bringing home and have that maintain your lifestyle. But if you do need to save, you don't have to guess how much. Let that financial planner help you build that plan to say, here's exactly what you need to save to make sure that your goals are well taken care of for the future. So in recap, build a transition and emergency fund to prep for any unknown expenses, not only that are emergencies, but also that are surprises during that transition. Create a realistic civilian budget, again, based off of what you were taking home. Take taxes and savings out of it. Whatever's left, that's what you're spending. Secure new insurances and benefits. So health insurance, dental, vision, all of that stuff, along with life insurance to help make sure that your family's protected, even though you're not in the service anymore. Understand and plan for taxes. Look, just because you retired from the military doesn't mean you retire from paying taxes. So we're going to pay taxes our entire life. So you got to understand how they are, how they're going to impact your situation. And then finally, make sure if you do get a new job and they have an employer-sponsored retirement plan, understand whether you should participate in that. Do you need to participate in that? Is there any type of match involved? And is saving going to be a necessity for you? So hope you found value in today's session. Look, I've gone down this path before, and I wish I knew then what I know now. So don't hesitate to reach out to your professional. Make sure you find somebody that you can work with, that you know, that you like, and that you trust to help you navigate situations like this. So enjoy the rest of your day and be well.